Now, Shahid Raza is an analyst based in Islamabad, and he joins me now. Shahid, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. There is a lot of a blame game going on right now, and certainly in Afghanistan, the finger of blame has been, in the last few weeks, pointed at Pakistan.
Thank you, Yelda, for having me. Obviously, it is a watershed moment, what is happening in Afghanistan today, specifically as we understand that there is a siege of Kabul, and there is ongoing negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban. We have also heard that the President Ashraf Ghani might resign. But it is also interesting what you have pointed out regarding blame game against Pakistan. It is just unfortunate because the Afghan government, until quite recently, they have not managed to secure their own areas. They have a 300,000 strong military. They have had significant Western aid as far as equipment and training is concerned. But what we have seen is throughout Afghanistan, they have not even been able to secure Afghanistan's border crossings with its neighbors. And if any, it would be unfair to blame Pakistan for the ineptitude and the lack of will on the behalf of the Afghan National Defense Forces to fight the Taliban. So, of course, there is a quarter in Kabul, especially President Ashraf Ghani and his associates who have been consistently blaming Pakistan, but it is not a solution to Afghanistan's problem. The Afghanistan's problem is a dynamic and fluid issue. It needs to be resolved between Afghans themselves. Pakistan's role is limited. It's been playing its mediator role in Doha and every other forum.
I have spoken to very well-respected analysts and experts about this, and I spoke to your national security advisor in Pakistan about this last week, about the use of the Taliban over the last 3 decades as part of Pakistan's proxy war. And I've spoken to former senators in Pakistan who have said to me, it's not the civilian government. This is part of the security establishment's sort of policy to use the Taliban, to fund them, to provide them with sanctuary, to use them against the Afghan state, because a weak Afghan state helps them regionally against India and to deal with issues like Kashmir, for example.
Yelda, it's very interesting. It's an interesting perspective. I would like to bring you back to the speech given by the former head of the CIA and the head of the American military mission in Afghanistan, General David Petraeus. He was speaking at the Royal United Institute in Britain. And he was asked this question directly, the question you have asked me, and his response was that during my time, I have not seen any significant evidence that supports the idea that Pakistan has been either funding or supporting the Taliban. There is contact, but that is consistent what other countries are doing. Britain has contacts with the Taliban. The Americans have held direct negotiations with the Taliban. So it is consistent with what you as a regional country would do, because anything that happens in Afghanistan has a direct impact on Pakistan. It has a knock-on effect on Pakistan. So the refugee crisis that is being created in Afghanistan is going to it's the 4th refugee wave that Pakistan is going to have to take care of. So obviously Pakistan cannot be detached to Afghanistan's situation, but to say that Pakistan has been using Taliban as a proxy, it does not merit facts. It's certainly an interesting opinion. It's certainly an interesting accusation on the part of some members of Western intelligentsia, on the part of the Indian state, on part of some elements in the Kabul government, but it does not merit facts. The Afghan Taliban, as you would have seen during the last 3 weeks, have taken over most of Afghanistan without any resistance from the Afghan army. They enjoy enormous public support at least in the rural areas of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think we need to make a distinction between what happens in certain parts of the country and the urban areas. And we just spoke to someone who said it's fine if we look at the rural areas, but we have to see whether they can create a life for us here in the urban areas. But yes, back to your point. I've spoken to Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf, who's told me that Pakistan has used the Taliban as part of their proxy war. He said, I did it. That was part of our policy. It's what we did. We needed a weak Afghanistan, and this is just what was part of our national security policy.
I think Pervez Musharraf was referring to what happened back in the 90s. Let me take you back to what happened in the 90s. There was a very vicious war in the wake of the Soviet invasion, and there were 7 major factions of the Mujahideen that were completely supported by Pakistan, by US, by Britain, by the West indeed, and by some Arab countries. So when the war ended, the Americans and the West simply withdrew from Afghanistan, which created a vacuum, which led to a vicious civil war. In that particular context, Pakistan did actually back one particular faction of that civil war, which was a mistake. And if you talk to any Pakistani policymakers, they would tell you that it was a mistake back then. And at the end of the day, what we are talking about in contemporary context, Pakistan's role is much more nuanced. It does have influence over the Taliban, but to say that it has some sort of an automated control over the Taliban or a proxy to Pakistan is just simply an incorrect statement. Taliban are an autonomous group. They raise their own money. They have their own financial channels. They enjoy support from other countries other than Pakistan as well. So to say that Pakistan has been using them as a proxy in a contemporary context is wrong. But if you are talking about Pervez Musharraf and the Afghan civil war in the mid-90s, I mean, then the blame would have to be shared between Pakistan and Western countries, because we were in it together.
Okay, Raza, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program.